You know, for me, you know, out of all the states, right, that I've taken exams in, I think that Texas is got a pretty unique. Now, it's not the hardest by any means, but it's got its own style. It's got its
Yes.
own complexity level, and it's got its own way of approaching things. And so, for that perspective, it is challenging for sure. I mean, you
Yes.
can't underestimate it by any means. Um,
Yes.
Now, PSI, regardless of what state you're taking a PSI exam in, they tend to word things the same way. So, I mean, once you've taken a couple of their exams, they're all pretty much relatively. I mean, you kind of understand what the way they're asking, kind of how to answer stuff. But until you've
Yes.
sat through there, you know, and done something with them on a state, you just won't quite understand the just the craziness, the way that they sometimes just come at you, you know, with the questions. Like, it's just like, why can't you just ask me straight out, you
Yes.
know, a question? I mean, we're trying to replicate what I would do in the field, right? So just ask me a real electrical question with, you know,
Yes.
like I would see it in the field.
Very
Oh my
true.
gosh.
Very
Yeah.
true. You know, sir, and I do have Mike Holt under my belt. He's been my sidekick through the whole time. I have
Has he?
his
Has he?
CDs. Oh yeah. So man, I've been watching the CDs, putting on pause, doing the notes, doing the calculations.
Well,
So
you'll
believe
probably
me.
fail tomorrow, but I mean, at least you have had fun. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh my God, my airplane just got shut down there.
Yeah, no, you know, Mike Holt was one of those guys that I felt so going originally in the trade. I thought that he was just the, you know, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then I got a little cocky, thought I knew a little bit more than I probably did. And then I was like, oh well, you know, he's nothing. You know, I got into this teaching class. I'm like, you know, I'm way better than him. And then, you know, I went to a couple of his classes because after I got so many licenses, it became more economically feasible to go out to Florida once a year because I could take, I think, 19 of the states that I have licensing in, I can knock out with just one class from him. So, yeah, it costs, you know, $1,500, you know, all said, maybe a little bit more, but it's worth it because otherwise I'd be doing them one class at a time in one state at a time. So it's, you know, it's just a headache. The first class I went to him, my entire opinion of him completely changed, and I really have a ton of respect for him as a person now, even more so than the trade value of what he brings to, you know, those of us in the trade. So
Yes,
he's
sir.
good people.
Yes.
So
Well, I
you know,
actually know somebody who knows Mike Holt. Well, I don't know. I'm blushing.
I have a couple of pictures with him.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Jeez. My wife is sick and tired of hearing his voice. Oh my gosh. Not again. Yes, sir. It's a Mike Holt kind
Yeah.
of day.
I mean, there's still times that, you know, he kind of gets like, you know, like he gets off tangent, but I mean that's like any good, I mean, any good electrical structures. I do that myself, you know. I can't really point fingers. So,
Okay. Well,
well,
sir, so
what can I
I'm
help you
really
with? It sounds like you could teach me something. So I'm gonna.
well, I mean, just I just wanted to see you. You mentioned your how to get quicker, and I know with your page numbers and stuff. But I do know the my sections, my articles. I feel like the calculation portion, I'm gonna pass with flying colors. I
Okay.
don't think I'm gonna have any issue whatsoever. Honestly, sir, I'm very good with numbers. Very
So
very good.
you wouldn't mind me asking you a couple of questions then?
Ask me. Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see here. Let me think of a good one. Hold on one second. Let me think about this one.
Turn up, turn
I'll
both.
try to, you know, and you know, my handwriting is not the best, but I'll try my best to make it somewhat legible. So, I want to share whiteboard. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so let's say that I had we'll call it a bank,
Okay. Yes.
and this bank has, let's just say it's got a lot of receptacles. It's got, and when
Mhm.
we're talking about receptacles, we're talking about outlets for general purpose receptacles. Is what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
So that being clarified, has, you know, we'll say it has four duplex receptacles that are rated at 20 amps,
Hmm.
and they are in each of 10 offices, And then we've got some GFCIs in a bathroom. GFCI.
In the bank? Wow. Okay,
No,
so you did that
in restroom.
Oh, okay, just a regular.
And let's see, there's 4 of them. I'm sorry, I messed that up. There's 4 GFCIs, and there are 4 GFCIs. These are also 20 amps, and they're in each of the 4 restrooms. 2 for the girls, 2 for the guys.
Yes,
Unless you're from Austin, there's 1 for the both and 1 for the guys and 2 for the girls. We're getting edged out. I don't know if you realize that or not, but we're getting edged out in this world. Let's see here. We're becoming an endangered species. I swear, I'm telling you. 4 restrooms. And then there are, let's just say 65 GP outlets for receptacles elsewhere throughout the bank. And these are all going to be rated for 20 amps as well. Now, after you apply any applicable D ratings, so after applying any applicable D rating, D rating, calculate the demand on the branch circuits. And I really don't know the answer because I just kind of made this up as we went along here. So chances are you'll get it right and I won't get it right. So walk me through this. Just kind of talk it. I'm going to just shut up and let you talk for a minute, but I would like you to just kind of walk through this the way you would think it through on a test.
Okay, well, first of all, you're going to be looking at a load calculation, so I'm going to go for my lighting. You don't have your square footage, so I'm not going to be going.
We're just talking about well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. So with
your
receptacles, your receptacles, which will be rated at 180 VA, correct? Per. Now you threw a curveball in here with your restroom. All the examples that I've had with my banks didn't include any outlets, but I mean, again, I would put them under 180 as well, but I would look into the kosher. You threw me a pretty big curveball there, buddy. Let's see.
I did not.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. Okay, so we have 40 receptacles, 4 duplex and 10 offices. So that's gonna be 40, and then you say you have
that good. All right, you got that part.
4 GFCIs. They're gonna be 20 amps also as well, and then 65 general. Okay, so you got another 65, 20 amperes. Okay, so you have a total of, if I'm not mistaken, 109.
9?
Receptacles. 109.
109 what? Receptacles or outlets?
Outlets.
Yep.
Outlets.
Yep.
Okay. 19620. Okay, now let me go to 220.
You can do anything that you want to do.
Right. Really, I literally just put my bags down and walked into the room here.
Man, that's not even fair.
No, but it's okay. We had a nice little bus trip from El Paso to here.
Bus trip, man. Golly,
Yeah,
you're hardcore at this, man. You're all in on this, aren't you?
You should have seen when I went to your class. We almost got mugged out there in Dallas.
Are you serious?
Well, I'm not kidding. I kid you not. My wife was like, okay, it was pretty bad here, but not as bad as it was in Dallas.
Really?
Yeah. I went all the way over there and almost died to go see you.
Wow. Well, I thought my class was good, but not worth dying over. That's for sure. We've had somebody. So we were in a class one day, and I think it was Dallas, as a matter of fact, and we were in a nice part of town, I thought. And we had, guys that would come into class, they park their vehicles right outside in the parking lot. This is broad daylight on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. Somebody broke the window of this guy's truck and stole his truck, like took the whole dang thing. Like they busted the window out and just took it.
Yeah, no, and I have similar stories when we used to live here in Phoenix, my wife and I. Oh yeah, not too good. Okay, sir. So I do have an answer for you now. After my derating, I have a total of 14,810 volt amps. So that's after
you derated it. 14. Yes. What did you say it was?
14,810.
14.
810.
All right, let's go back. You said a couple of things I wanted to kind of go back and address, right?
Yes.
So there's a critical piece of this master's test that you're going to have to be really aware of, and I don't think my Colt really touches on it because this is one of those things that's kind of more unique to PSI. I presume they seem to be really heavy on it here in Texas, and I think it's more than just Texas that they do this with. But anyway, look in your code book. Let's before we really get started. Let's look at the sections that you would use to calculate this question with, right? So you had mentioned a couple of other things when you first started. You went through a couple of, like, in your mind, you went through a laundry list of checkoffs, right?
Yes.
You said something about the lighting load.
Yes.
I even thought I may have heard you say a value for it, like 3.5 or something, but maybe not. But you mentioned that. You mentioned a couple other loads, and you said something else. And then you also said something else I was going to point out. Can't remember now what it was, but it was basically, when you're trying to formulate where this question is at in your code book. So the sections that specifically deal with receptacles that are non-residential type, which is really kind of what we're talking about here, mainly the main controlling one is going to be 220.14i.
14i.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say probably, and in class I usually tell guys to write commercial next to that section because effectively the way the code book is it's like everything is residential or not is the way that the code book is kind of written. So obviously it doesn't say commercial right next to that section, but it should because it's pretty much what the not is most of the time for us. Now there are some other exceptions, industrial and some other things, but for the most part, receptacles that are under dwelling units would calculate under J, which is right above it. Right below it. But section I is really used mainly for commercial type occupancies. So let's take a quick look at that. Receptacle outlets. Except is covered in J, which is right below that, and then also K, which we'll get to in just a minute. Pretty much receptacles are going to calculate and not less than 180 VA per yoke. And that's a number that you grabbed onto right off the bat. So I was proud to see that. You knew that by memory. You didn't have to go look it up. I mean, you were almost off to the races right on the get-go. And I asked you about it. Is it outlets or is it outlets for receptacles? And your answer was correct. It's outlets for receptacles because a single receptacle or a double receptacle on the same yoke would count the same 180 VA, right?
Yes, we do. Yes.
All right. It's no yoke. So we would need to think about that from that perspective. Now, banks or office buildings are kind of special places because we know that the stuff that's in I is for places that are not as prone to using their receptacle outlets as a bank or office building is. In other words, a bank or office building, really, we know that they have a lot of stuff that they plug in to their, the receptacle outlets or general purpose outlets. So I know that in this bank that we're talking about here, they're going to have a lot of cash counting machines. They're going to have a lot of teller machines, adding machines, computers, monitors. They will put a heavier load on the general purpose receptacle circuits than they would if they were in a restaurant where they get plugged in maybe once a night during the cleanup phase, right?
Yes.
So because of that, the values that you see in section I down in section K where it says office bill, you're in the 20, you have a 2020 edition, correct?
Yes, I do.
So you're on page 76, 75, sorry. Now it says office buildings. Now, would we put a bank in that section K?
Yes, we would, because office buildings are office, yes, in the bottom on the informational notes, stores, barbershops, pubs, banks are office type occupancies.
Exactly. A bank to the building code is a B occupancy. It's not an M for merchant, but it's a B occupancy. So it's just like an office building would be. So, we would use it now. So because we know that they're going to put a heavier load on the general purpose receptacle outlets, then we basically have two separate calculations that we're required to do anytime I have outlets that are receptacle outlets that are in an office or a bank type occupancy. So those two methods are, number one, the one I think you probably used right there for that 14.810, which they describe in section K1 as the method in 220.14i. So K1 basically equals 22.14i. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
You have to do the math there, do any derating applicable to it, so on and so forth, and come up with that number. When you're done with that number, which is what you claim you got 14,810 on,
Yes, sir.
then and only then you go to do item number 2. And item number 2 says, well, 1 VA per square foot.
Yes.
That number cannot be derated. So K2 is basically the square footage, 1 VA times the square feet, and then you would be doing no derating. So whatever that would be it. Now, in my case, I didn't give you the square foot.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in that question about the square footage, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But on your book, I do want you to write yourself a note. You even say, it even says here under K1, they clarified in this 2020 edition, which is a nice clarification. It was necessary for them to do this. And they said in that gray text, after all demand factors have been applied.
Yes.
All right. So, well, what demand factors are they talking about?
Okay, they're talking about the first 10,000 to be at 100% and the
Okay,
remaining.
where do you find that? Physically, where do you find that in your code book?
This would be table 220.44, demand factor for non-dwelling receptacles.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Let's look at that table. So if you're on page 76, which is where you're telling me that table, 220.44, bottom right-hand column, right?
Yes, sir.
What part number of the article 220 does that technically fall under?
Part 3, sir, feeder and service load calculations.
You just said the magic word.
You know what? You're absolutely right.
Everything. When you first started talking, you were talking feeder, because that's what I mean. All the things that you said originally, that's all a feeder mentality, because you're calculating the lighting load, you're calculating all these, and you're absolutely right. If they asked me to calculate feeder, those would be the correct. But if they're asking me for, in this case, I think I said branch, right?
Yes. Okay, so then you'd be dividing that by 240.
So yeah, exactly. Part 2, which is actually the Roman numerals actually on page 74, I think, over there on the left-hand column. That's the branch circuit calculations, which means if I'm sitting over there on section K, which is where we were at, which is for branch or technically feeders for that matter, there's no derating tables for me to take?
No, sir, there's not.
And that's kind of the key. They baited you just like, and I don't blame you. I'm just trying to drive home a point. You have to be very careful that you read these questions as exactly as you can, because I know that you're going to be very optimistic and you're very excited, and you'll go in there and they may have a question that might be exactly what you just did, where they're asking you for the actual feeder calculation, and everything that you said was absolutely correct. But if they're asking you for a branch, that's a whole different animal, and you have to be able to kind of take a breath and make sure that you read that part in the question, and don't let your mind make your mind up before you've kind of really breathed that question in a little bit. If that, I know it sounds like I'm, yeah, okay.
No, thank you. You got me. You got me.
Well, I mean, I was just trying to, I will tell you, you've got plenty of time when it comes to math. They give you 33 questions. You only get graded for 30 of them, but out of those 33, they give you enough time that it comes out to like 5.25 minutes per question. So take your time. Don't be in too much. I mean, you have enough time to be able to read those questions and sit back and go, okay. And I always do this. I mean, I'm like, okay, what kind of question is this? Well, it's a load calculation is what it is. And I mean that because it's not an installation. They're not asking me how to install them. They're asking me, well, once they're installed, how do I calculate them? Then my next question is almost always, well, is this a branch or is this a feeder? Because that's really kind of the two components that I could be doing a load calculation in. And then if I determine it's a branch, well, then branches could be a lot of different things. They could be motor branch questions. They could be, a bunch of different ranges, dryer, whatever. But in this case, this was a branch receptacle calculation in a commercial building, in specifically a bank or an office type. So I mean, there's little filters that would get me there, but once I'm there, I'm going. You need to make sure you kind of take a step back and go, okay, what section am I calculating this out of? And just remember that you shouldn't take any derating on anything that's effectively not a feeder or a service.
I got a note on that. Thank you.
All right. So let's work this through real quick just so that we can kind of be on the same page. You got 40, you said you got 14,180, I think.
That's after derating, sir. So I'm already wrong.
Well, what did you get before you derated it?
Before I derated it was 19,620.
I think you're off by just one receptacle, and that may just be your math, or it could be the count that I may, or maybe I'm the one that's wrong, because I just wrote this down, so I could be thinking something different. But we have 4 receptacles, and there's 10 offices, right? So that right there was 40, and I think you caught that, so no problem.
And 4 GFIs.
Oh, but there was four GFCIs and 4 restrooms, so that's 12.
Oh, okay. There, no, that's right there. Yeah, that got me.
And then you got the 65, right? So we got 65, 77 plus 40, which would be 110, 27, 120. Is that right? Did I totally just mess that math up?
40.
Oh,
Plus
calculator. Where in the world are all my calculators?
plus 55 equals. Okay, so it's gonna be 247.
247.
Yes.
How did I miss that?
Is that what? Okay, so it was 40 and then 142. No, I'm sorry, 40. What? No, that was.
I think
Wait
we're
a
both.
minute.
I think we're both smoking crack because I think neither one of us.
Okay, so it's gonna be. You said okay with the GFIs. You said there's gonna be 4 and 4 restrooms, correct? Or
Yeah. So you got the 4. Well, first of all, you had the 40 that were in the offices. Then the 4 and 4 restrooms was 12. So together that's 52, right?
4 and 4 restrooms. Okay, that's 12.
Yeah. So,
But 4 times 4 wouldn't be 16, buddy.
huh? I'm 16. Oh, oh my
Okay,
gosh. Oh my gosh. Cannot believe that. You
okay,
are
16.
absolutely, fundamentally, completely right. But it's
Okay, so
still 56, 56 and 65.
I have a total of 121.
Okay, I'll buy that for $1. I'm not even gonna say anything then after that one. So you got 121. You're saying
Yes, I
that's
do.
outlets for
Yes, sir.
receptacles,
Yes.
meaning that could be a single, duplex, whatever. They squeeze more of them in there, all better
Yes.
for them. Times 180 VA for each one of those puppies. And what does
Yes.
that give you on a load calculation or on a calculator?
21,780.
How much?
21,780.
780.
Yes, sir.
And then, all right, so that would be, if you go back and look at, section K1, which basically takes you back to 220.14i, that would be basically, that's it. 21,780 would be my branch circuit load. And if you think about it like this, on a branch circuit, we don't typically do a lot of derating because on a branch circuit, I'm doing one breaker, one set of wire to a load value that I just calculated here. I mean, I can't really risk derating that branch circuit because I could have everything on that branch circuit come on. I mean, it's possible. Now, once I start putting a bunch of branch circuits together in a feeder, then I don't think all those branch circuits will all be on at the same time. And that's where the diversity factor starts to happen. And that's why we start to get to derate stuff once I start combining branch circuits together on a set of feeders.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if they were asking me for like the minimum number of branch circuits in a case like this, I would keep every bit of that 21,780. I would divide it by 20 amps at 120 volts or 15 or whatever the breaker size they were giving me. And so that's just a food for thought.
Yes,
all right.
Sir. No, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You also have to worry about another 2 real big key terms that they throw around a lot, and it's very similar to what we just got through talking about. But these key terms are the difference between what we would call a connected load and a demand load.
Yes.
And you're comfortable with those? Understand that pretty well?
Well, demand load would be the ratio between what the motor is carrying and the actual input, correct?
Are you talking about like true power versus apparent power?
Yes, something. I guess I got
watts versus true power. So no, so we're talking about so electrically wise, when we're talking about math, math is one of those things you have to be very careful that you define the units that we're talking about, because the units can be different depending on what type of calculation you're doing. But in this case, what I mean is that well, let me rephrase that. When I'm doing a calculation, there's multiple steps or I guess links that I could go with a certain math. Like, for example, with that branch circuit, we had possibly another step we could do depending on whether or not we were doing branch or feeders. Yeah. So in the code, we call something that doesn't have anything but the initial step effectively, we call that the connected load. And so connected load would be, can you imagine if everything they possibly could be on in a certain circuit or feeder or panel, if whatever that highest value would be, we call that the connected load. Here's a perfect example of it. How many times have you ever, I mean, if you've seen like a 42 space panel, right?
Yeah.
With like a main on top. Typical those mains are what, 200, maybe 400 amps on a big 42 space panel.
Yes, sir.
So if have you ever tried to take 20 amp, that like if it was full of 20 amp breakers, have you ever tried to add those 20 amp breakers up to see what the size that breaker in that
Yeah.
panel would
It's much bigger. Oh yeah, because
yeah
not everything is on at the same time. No, yeah, definitely. I
yeah
get you.
yeah so if I were to add everything in that panel, it'd be like 840 amps at 42
Yeah.
spaces 20 amps. I mean, that's a connect, but that's what we call connected load. That would be the maximum theoretical value. We also call equipment or nameplates or equipment rating or manufacturers ratings. All of those are examples of connected loads, but those don't really happen in the real world because of the different variations and stuff. So we have another term that we use to describe the real world part of the math. So we have the initial math, which is the worst case scenario, and then we have a factor that we apply that gets us some sort of a discount, or can sometimes increase it, but usually it's a discount. And then the final number that we get is called the demand load. So you have connected load and demand load, and those two terms, they will play games with that all day long tomorrow. Your head will be spinning because they'll give you a question phrased in a manner that you're expecting to do a demand derating step on, but they may actually be asking you for the connected load. And so be careful of that. Make sure you're answering what unit they're actually asking you for. So same thing would apply in this case. Let's say that we had this 21780.
Yes.
For a branch circuit, that is both the connected load and the demand load, because I would use that but that is my calculated value, but it's also what I would use for the branch circuit.
Okay.
But when I take the next step, which is that discount for the feeder, because I know that when I start piling all those circuits together, they're not all going to operate at the same time, and that's where that table comes into play. So the demand factor in this case is kind of a process, but when we take the like let's say that we're no longer doing a branch, but we're actually doing a feeder or a demand on a feeder, that 21,780, if I was allowed to use that table, then I would take the first 10,000 of it. And of course, that's what you did already with that other number you had. That'd be 11,780, right? Yeah. And then that 50% right there that you see in that table is the factor. So half of 11,780, which would be 5,500 plus 390, 380, no, 390. Be 5580 plus 390 be 5890.
Yes.
I did that in my head. It's
Yeah,
probably not right.
5890. Sorry, my calculator was I don't know,
Is
I
that
was in
right?
speed.
I
Yeah,
got that right?
5890. Yes, you got it right.
Man.
Hey, you're
Okay.
not bad.
All right.
Yeah.
And then remember that 10,000 of course comes over here as well.
Yes.
So we're saying, look, this is what we really realistically think is going to happen. And that 15,890, which, like I said, yours wasn't wrong. You just had some numbers miscounted, but the process that you did was correct. The 15,890 and the 21,780, both of those are correct numbers in their own rights. If they ask me for a connected load, I'm going to answer 21,780. If they ask me for a branch circuit, I'm going to answer 21,780. If they ask me for a feeder or for a demand load, I'm going to give them 15,890.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
You see?
I'm telling you, you'll be surprised. Now that you're paying attention to it, you're going to see some things. You're going to be like, oh man, that's some dirty stuff. That is so subtle, so just But now that you know to look for it, hopefully that'll be forewarned and not get you. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes.
What else? You're like, man, didn't even know I needed to know that.
Well, well, you know what? Okay, for fire pump. Oh, no. Let's go
Fire
back to,
pumps, throw it at
okay.
me.
Okay, well, you know what? There were some questions regarding voltage loss in where you're able to get the exact voltage loss on every resistor with your parallel and with your series, of course. But and I have your paperwork here, like I said, I just came in. I had some questions on that. I do know
Sure.
the whole the rules with your in parallel where you got your it's all your E's are the same value on every resistor. Your I's are gonna
What does E
be
stand for?
E is gonna be volts. I know you mentioned you like V or
Well, I mean, what does volts start with?
with a V.
So why do they use E? How does that even make any sense?
You know, MikeHope.com.
Like seriously,
Yes,
I learned it the same way you're talking about it right now. I always thought about it as E and I, and
I and R,
I
right?
pretty much the last time I checked, ampacity does not start with an I.
Yes, very true. Very true.
So I'm just warning you.
Yes, very true. Yeah, when I took your course, I was like, oh, what? I gotta slow down on this one here.
So when it comes to Ohm's law, just FYI, remember there's only two formulas you have to worry about, that and only two.
PIE and EIR or
Nope,
V
wave and var.
wave and var. Yes, yes, I got
Wave
that.
and var.
Okay.
Your PIE and IER are correct. I mean, that's what they are, but yeah.
Now, in my master exam, will they be asking me questions regarding those the voltage drops in parallel circuits to give me the voltage loss in each resistor or something the way you asked on yours, or
So think about it like this. Let's not call it voltage drop. Let's call it voltage loss, which I think you said. But in a series circuit, we have 100% voltage loss.
yes, exactly, yes,
And then
yes,
in a parallel circuit, we have a percentage that's slightly of a voltage drop. And so it took me a while to kind of put that in mind, but it's 100% voltage loss in series, but
okay.
in parallel, it's just a drop because we're only losing 3 to 5% in a parallel circuit.
Okay, furthest outlet out.
So
Voltage.
there's two different and I think people get confused on the test because we tend to talk about parallel our voltage drops in the trade,
Mhm.
and maybe even on the test, but when they're talking about a Ohm's law where it's in series, it's not a voltage drop, it's a 100% loss.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And it's just different mindset, right? So we're going to use the same formula. If it's resistors, we use the same formula for either one of them, which you're thinking of as EIR. I think of them as VAR.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
same exact formula, but for me, just this one is instinctively easier for me to tell right off the bat what all those components are and what the relationship is. So I scoffed at it when I first heard it. I actually saw it on YouTube once years and years ago, and I was like, oh, that's silly. Who in the
Yeah.
world would ever use something like that? We know what EIR stands for. We're professionals. But I
Yes, sir.
tried it one time, and the difference, was night and day, and I've never gone back after that. So it's just but right now, tonight's not the night for you to relearn it. So if you did a EIR, fine, that works for me. Now in series, are you asking how to do those, or are you ready to do the parallel, or are you asking me if you have
Or
those on?
can you give me an example of our maybe voltage loss in a series and a voltage drop in a parallel? Just one basic one. I can with the very basic one, I can build on that. Because I do know, like you say, there's 100% voltage loss in a series. So I tried to do a few equations where I could add up at this particular resistor, this is how much voltage loss we have. Resistor 2, this is how much voltage loss. Resistor 3, where I'd be able to add it all up and to equal the initial voltage, the initial line what was coming in. And I could not do that. So it was driving me crazy because I've done it so many times before a long time ago. But I was hoping you can help me out.
For me, this one is the easiest of all of them because it's basically 3 steps. And I just learned the steps really more than I did anything else, but I'll show you the math here in a second. But remember, there's 2 things about a series voltage drop or voltage loss that I know for a fact. Number one, because I know that I'm going to lose all the voltage across the resistors that I've listed there.
Yes.
I know that I need to have values at the end that equal back to 120 volts. I couldn't
Yes.
ever be less or more because it's 100%, right?
Yes.
So whatever that loss, whatever the answer is, I'm expecting to see it in chunks that add up to 120 volts. The
Yes.
second thing is that in series, the bigger the resistor is, the more voltage it's going to consume and the less that's going to get escape from it to go to the next one. So
Okay.
I'm also kind of expecting to see the same pattern of sizing in my answers as well. So knowing those two things, that the answer has to be both in the same pattern as the resistor sizes are, and that they have to equal up to 120 when it's all said and done as far as voltage goes. Those will typically narrow down your answers to one or two before you do any math, right? And if not one, one way or the other. But that being said, really the first thing you do in series, the thing about series circuits is it looks exactly opposite of in parallel. In other words, in parallel, we have a relationship of amps that look like this. Amp total at a branch is equal to amp 1 plus amp 2 plus amp 3, so on and so forth. In other words, I add up all the amps in a circuit in parallel, and that's my total amps of the branch. That's why we have 20 amp or 30 amp, 40 amp breakers, because they get bigger and bigger as we add more loads and amps to them. But what happens to the voltage in the parallel circuit? It stays the same. It's constant.
Yes. Constant.
That
Yes.
that fact means that the most important thing to us in the trade for our math is that voltage constant, because that constant is something we can rely on no matter what. If I know what the service value is, if I know the branch circuit is, I know what the voltage would be anywhere in that distribution system. So that's my constant value, and it looks like this when you write it out as a formula: VT equals V1 equals V2. In other words, they're always the same no matter where you're at.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I'm writing this down so you can see that series, basically, the way I've always kind of kept it straight in my mind is they look exactly like that. They're just in reverse order of each other. In other words, down here, VT is equal to V1 plus V2 plus V3. So it acts like amps, where it adds instead of remains the same. But what happens to the amperage is that they never change. Amperage total is going to equal amperage 1 is going to equal amperage 2, which is going to equal amperage 3. And I'm explaining this to you because I'm trying to make you remember, when it comes to a series circuit, my best friend is that or that. Doesn't matter which one of those. If I know 1 amp anywhere in that circuit, I then have a constant value that I can use to plug things in, right?
Yes. True. Yes.
So that's why almost always in a series circuit, I'm going to go gunning for the branch circuit calculation at whatever the breaker is, whatever the source is, before I do anything else, because I want to try to see if I can figure it out there, and then I can just backfill it in. All right. So when we're talking about a series circuit of resistors, let's say we had the 120 volts here, like I just mentioned. It's coming out of this source, it's going over, and it's hitting a resistor that I said was 9 ohms, right? It comes out of that one, goes into the 6 ohm, comes out of that, goes into the last one, which is the 3 ohm, and it comes back over here. I know one thing for sure: when I come out of this third resistor right here, I've got 0 volts left.
Yes.
I have to lose all of this number across this one, and this one in a proportionate manner based off the size that each one of them is. In other words, that it's proportionate. So if this one was 3 times as big as this one, then I'd lose 3 times the volts as that one, so on and so forth. All right, now I have 9 ohms right here, I have 6 ohms right here, and I have 3 ohms right here. And you're asking me, well, what is the voltage drop? Well, the voltage loss is, what do I lose right here in volts? What do I lose right here in volts? And what do I lose right here in volts? That's what that volt, because all three of these added back together are going to end up equaling that 120, right? Or subtractively, they equal 0, depending on how you look at it. All right. Now, so the only formula there's 2 formulas I told you have to have. VAR is one of the 2. And it's the only one you have if there's a resistor value in the question. So I know without a doubt this VAR is what I'm going to be calculating. Now let's say that I'm looking for a voltage loss value right here at point number 1. We'll call it point number 1. If I'm looking for the voltage drop right there, I'm looking for the V value right there, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That's my question mark. And then the things that I have to know in order to be able to calculate that right there at that spot, I have to know 2 things. Number 1 is the resistor value that exists right there, which they gave me that's 9. But the other thing I have to know is that bad boy right there. And right now, just looking at it, I don't have that number. So I can't really calculate a voltage drop without knowing what that amp is. But if I do know what the amp is, right here or here, here or here or here, anywhere in that circuit, if I can figure out what the amps are, I can plug that in, and that's the missing link I need to calculate the voltage loss. So I'll go, all right, I can't get it at the branch or on the point side over on this side over here because I don't have what I need, But if I do that same formula here, right here at the branch, the VAR, excuse me, I do have what I need to calculate this amps right here, because what I have is the volts given to me right there is a branch. So I've got 120 at the top.
120.
And the other thing I need is I need this plus this plus this, because in resistors in series simply act like amps in parallel. They just add up.
Okay.
So that other piece that I need right there, which is the total resistive value, I have it by just taking the 9, the 6, and 3 and adding them together. So I'm just going to basically take that 120 volts, which is the beginning over here. I'm going to take that 9 ohm. I'm going to take this 6 ohm. I'm going to take this 3 ohm. And I'm going to go over here and go, I got 120 volts divided by the total resistance, which is 9, 6, and 3, which is 18 ohms, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to divide the bottom into the top always. So the bottom always divides into the top. So I'll take 120 volts. I'm going to divide that by 18. What does that give you?
18 is going to give us 66.67 rounded off.
6.67 amps, right?
Yes, sir.
Bam, you just unlocked the keys to the kingdom, because that right there is the same value there, same value there, same value there, anywhere in the branch circuit. And now the VAR becomes very clear, because I'm going to take, yes, you got it, 6.67 amps times 9 ohms. That's going to give me that loss there, or not 6.67 times 6, or 6.67 times 3.
6, 7, oh man. There you go, 40, 46.
Break it down.
Wow, you made it look so easy.
I've had a lot of practice.
40, 50, 60. So then our 9 would have to be 60 then. Okay.
Right
60,
off the,
40, and
yes.
20. Yeah. 60, 40, and 20. Okay, awesome. Now that's been a mystery for such a long time. You just answered it. Okay, you know what? And the reason why I withdrew back from that fire pump is I actually figured it out. They were asking to the controller or to the motor. Now
Okay.
they have different percentages, 5% and 15%. So that at the end, I don't need help with. I figured out what my problem was.
Let's talk about fire pumps, though, because you will see several
Yes.
questions that have. So just real quickly,
Yes.
people, you know, and myself included, tend to either be scared of fire pumps or treat them as if they're regular motors. You know, and I did both for different various stages of my career. So, I mean, fire pumps are you don't have to be scared of them, but there are some specific rules. Then they aren't exactly like motors, but they are in some cases. So, fire pumps for you on this test could be what you just talked about, which is the voltage drop at the terminal for a fire pump. You know, for the
Yes.
startup or running the loads. Which you're right. You said the values. I think it's what 3% or no, it's not 3%. It's 5% or 15, right?
It's 15% at the fire pump controller, and it is 5% at the load terminals, but only if it's at a full load current. 15,
Right.
150%. Yes.
Okay. So you already know 695, because you'd have to know that to be able to find what you just talked about
Yes.
there. So that's good.
Yes. Oh yeah.
What if I had the following pieces of equipment? Let's say that I had a 50 horsepower, 3-phase, 480 volt
480.
fire pump.
Okay.
And I had a jockey pump, or a maintenance pump,
Okay.
that was also a 3-phase motor, but it was 480 at 5 horsepower.
5 horsepower. Okay.
And I also had a control cabinet, and this control cabinet had all the lights, bells, whistles, annunciators, all that kind of stuff. And that control cabinet had a load of, I want to say that it's like 10 amps or something. It's pretty small, but they just give it to you like that. What would be the demand on the feeders that you would have to calculate all of that as? How would you go about calculating the feeders that would feed all 3 of those pieces of equipment?
Well, first of all, I would definitely get my ampacity. My full load current would be at 240/50 motors. I would start off with, okay, so we're going to
Page 333, 333, yeah.
There we go. Okay, so we got our 3-phase and 3-phase 50 horsepower. at 480, which you're gonna use 460, it's gonna be a 65 amps. And then you got your three-phase 485 horsepower to 48, 7.6. 1.6, and then you have your other one at 10 amps. Now, okay, the off the top of my head, without like really looking, is the first thing that's coming to my head is the largest motor here and sizing it at 125%. But I mean, I think that's gonna be wrong because that's motors, like you said. You get motors in that. Let me go back to 695, which is going to be our fire pumps. Okay, so we have our full load currents according to the table, 430. Our 50 horsepower three-phase 480 is at 65 amps. And our three-phase 485 horsepower is going to be at 7.6 amps. And then we also have a control cabinet load at 10 amps. So conductors for only the fire pump. No, we're looking for the, you said feeder. Okay.
Well, the conductors, you're in the right spot.
I'm in the right spot. Okay. Well, the voltage at the starting current line. Well, okay. Look, I'm just gonna throw a Hail Mary here and just.
Okay, fair enough.
65 times 1.25 because it's gonna be 81.25 plus 7.6 plus 10. Okay, I am going with a grand total of 98.85.
98.85 is what you got?
Yes, sir.
That would be a number 3, I think, for 75 degree column. Be good for 100 amps, is what you're saying?
6. Yes. Yes.
All right. So let's see. All right. So start on page 603.
603. Okay.
Fire pump motors. So we're talking about conductor size first and foremost.
Yes.
So we're on 695.6. What if my glasses? 695.6 B.
B2.
Yeah, B. Well, yeah, or B1
Or
because we have other
B1,
equipment,
yeah.
right?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
This is worded kind of weird because it says conductor supplying fire pump, pressure maintenance pumps, and associated fire pump accessory equipment shall have a rating not less than 125% of the sum. If you stop reading right there, you'd apply 125% to everything. But it continues though and says, but that's just to the fire pump. But it does include the pressure motor, but it doesn't include anything else. So the rest of it would be 100% of the associated fire pumps. So in other words, what's different here than a regular motor is that we'll take both the fire pump and any like the jockey pump is just to make sure that fire pump has enough water pressure.
Okay.
So if you are in a building and you're really high up, or if you're in an area of town that has low water pressure, you're required to have a jockey pump to be able to pressurize that water to the level that fire pump can, effectively use it, right? Gotcha. So because of that, it's an important part of the function of that fire pump. And you don't want to have anything impact it either, just like the fire pump. So both of those pieces being important, we're going to use the 125% of both of these numbers combined. So that's unlike a motor feeder where you've got a feeder, several motors on the same set of feeders. If they're fire pumps, we do count both of the motors that are involved with the fire pump and the pressure equipment. So we take 65 plus 7.6, which would be 72.6, I believe, times 125%. And then add the 10 amps at 100% to that number.
Plus 10. Hey, I wasn't too far.
And what does that give you?
100.75, sir.
100.7. 100.75?
Yes, sir.
Really? You got 98.85? That was the difference, huh?
65 plus 7.
Oh, I believe you. I'm just thinking that's funny that it came that close.
No, actually, I'm wait, 65 plus 7. My calculator has sticky fingers because of my.
I got 90.75.
Yes, you know what? You're absolutely right. Yes, 1.25. Yes, 90.75. Yes.
Okay, that's what we got when we did this, and so I think you probably might have had. So let me go back and look at your 98.85 and see if maybe that might have been. Did you use 125 just on the 65 amps?
Yes, the first time. Yes, sir.
And that would have then given you plus the 7.6 plus the 10 would have given you. Oops, that's not right. 65 times 1.25 plus the 7.6 plus the 10. So you would have got 9. Wait a minute. Oh, but I got to add my 10 amps to that 90.75.
Yeah.
That's what so you're right. Your 98.85 was correct if you'd have done it that way. I forgot to add the 10 amps over there. We just did that. And I didn't add I didn't finish that. I'm sorry. 72.6 times 1.25. Oh my gosh. I'm just not, it's been a long day. Plus 7.6 amps.
Yes.
Plus the 10 amps, which is going to be the control cabinet. And you said it right, I think, the first time. And then I let you talk me out of the right answer the next time. 108.35.
Yes, sir.
Not a huge difference, but it's a whole different wire size.
Yes, definitely.
One would be a number 3, and one of them be a number 2. Correct.
Yes.
I'm going to use a 75-degree collar for fire pumps, for motors, for transformers, pretty much across the board, unless I'm doing a wire and passing, they give me all the jacket insulation type and things of that nature. But just remember, when it comes to fire pumps, the conductors are slightly different, but they're not as much different as you would think. If it's just a fire pump and nothing else, that's just 125%, just like it would be for any other regular motors. Nothing special about them.
Okay.
When a fire pump kicks on, it's not the wire we're worried about. It's the heaters or the breakers that we're worried about. And for the love of God, you don't want that building to be burning down. And the one thing that's abating the damage or the risk factor is that fire pump, and it goes off because it just got too hot, and the overload stripped, or the the breaker opened. So when we're talking about that, those are where we really are way different than a regular motor. If you look on page 601 under 695.4B2, which is on the right-hand side of page 601. It's on the right-hand side, kind of toward the top. We basically want that to carry indefinitely the sum of the locked rotor current, not the FLA, but the locked rotor current. Think about that. You want me to carry locked rotor current for an indefinite time period. Locked rotor current. LRC.
Yes, sir.
That is a huge number.
Yes.
We calculated that 50 horsepower motor right there at 65 amps, right? That's an FLA or FLC value.
Yes, sir.
Locked rotor current for that same motor would be like 360 some odd amps.
That would be 390, sir.
390, and we would have to carry that indefinitely, is what they're telling us. And then if I'm sizing an overcurrent device, it even says that if the next standard size, if that doesn't correspond to standard size, round up even. So when it comes to sizing breakers, if you're even allowed to put one, some municipalities like Austin, we won't even allow you to do that. We don't even want to have any overcurrent device ahead of that fire pump.
And I've heard that said before, just let it burn. I mean, the last thing to go should be the fire pump.
That's exactly right. That'd be the last that's when Elvis leaves the building, when that thing catches fire. You know what I'm saying? So if you have to size a breaker for it, use the locked rotor current table that's on page 334. Now that will only apply to design B, C, and D type motors, but all the ones I've ever seen them give on the test were designed to class B or design B. That 50 horsepower there is 363, you said? Yep, 363. So if you're sizing a breaker, 363 amps is the locked rotor current for that 65 amp motor.
Yes, sir.
LRC. So what size breaker would you put on that then?
Okay, so I'm still trying to get to the the LRC. You said we were at page 334. Okay, I got it. Wait, no, that's error. That's
page 334 on the top of that page. That's 430.251B, and it specifically says locked rotor or conversion table for polyphase. Polyphase just means more than one phase, so it'd be three phase.
So then we're gonna have 460 volts of B, C, and D, and we were at 300 and the rated horsepower was 50.
Yeah, it's 50 horsepower at 460 volts.
At 460 volts would be 363.
And that's locked rotor.
That's locked rotor current. Okay.
And I have to carry that indefinitely, and I'm trying to do just a regular molded case circuit breaker, which we call those inverse time circuit breakers. What size breaker would that be?
Inverse time circuit breaker. I'm gonna have to go to 430 real quick.
Yep, and that inverse time circuit breaker is just a regular garden variety everyday breaker.
Yes, it's two. Is that 50%? If I'm not mistaken.
It's exactly right. Times
Yeah,
250%.
250%. Yeah, 'cause all down until you get to like your
I'm no, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me. No. You don't have to do that on these. I'm sorry. I'm taking you down the wrong pathway. No, it just to be the 363 and then round that up to the next standard size breaker.
Okay,
So it'd be a
360.
400 amp breaker.
244.
Yep. Sorry.
240.
I don't know what I
No,
was
no, no.
thinking.
You're good, sir. You're good. Okay, so 363 next standard breaker would be 363. 400.
Yep.
400 ampere. All right.
I would argue that you can't really consider that to be an indefinite. I mean, because at some point, like if that's continuous duty at that point at 3 hours, why wouldn't you add on the other 125% for the heat load of the conductors that they're adding to the circuit, including the breaker they're terminated to? But that's not the way it's just whatever that locked rotor current is, rounded up to the next standard size is what we do for it.
Yes, I probably would put another power source on that, a backup somehow. Let it keep going even
Well,
further.
I mean, we got a 65 amp rated motor with a 400 amp breaker. You know what I mean? It's a pretty good.
Yeah, overkill.
There is a section in there where we used to use the 600% rule for these things, but you take 65 times 600%, then, but that's now it's still in there, but you have to have a lot of other pieces to go with it from manufacturer, like the control equipment and stuff. So, all right, what else?
Well, you know what? Actually, sir, I really think that I'm comfortable right now where I stand. I'm gonna continue with all my notes, all my review,
And all your cold stuff.
Yeah, because oh my God, last night I didn't go to sleep till like 3 in the morning, afraid that I was gonna miss my bus over here, and I studied all the way over here. I only got about 2 hours of sleep, so my mind is really not where it should be. So I'm gonna try to take a little break and then get back on it.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I have him in the background almost all day long, so I'm not even gonna try to lie and tell you I don't. So, but here's the thing, he's got really good stuff when it comes to generally learning about the code and things. I feel like he's really a really good source for that. But you just have on this particular Texas test, you got to be very careful, because remember, the one thing about this Texas test that I can tell you is different from any other state that I've ever taken an exam in, and that is the exceptions rule that we do in Texas is night and day different, and it will totally change the way you apply certain steps of math. So be careful of that. We do not use exceptions in the state of Texas unless that question flat out says you're allowed to use exceptions in this question.
Yes,
if they apply.
I was about to say, I thought we didn't have exceptions. I was about to say that, but wow.
If they do, well, no, we don't. Just ignore except. Now, if they tell you in a question, given exceptions or allowing exceptions or something of that nature, then yes, you're allowed to take them. But even if you're reading an exception and there's some conditions in that tell you, okay, if you have these things exist, you can take this as an exception. On this test, you cannot take it unless they tell you to take it.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and that's the thing with like Mike Holt and Tom Henry, anybody out of the state, they're much more of a broader audience, and since that's only a Texas thing, you have to be careful with certain things, because when it comes to motor breakers, all the rounding and stuff that we do there is an exception. So you have to be incredibly careful, because if you do what you normally do, according to Mike Holder in the field, it will not be the right answer necessarily on the Texas exam. And there's also some little things like the junction box size. And I had a video, and by the way, I have some YouTube video too, sir, in case you're, wondering.
No, yes, definitely. I did see you have some videos to be able to see. Unfortunately, where I live is like in the middle of nowhere. I live in a ranch, so I mean, signal comes and signal goes. Yeah. So I never had the opportunity ever. But now I do. I have Wi-Fi. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, either way, as long as but the one thing you do need to remember is you do need to get some good rest tonight. So at some point you need to cut this off and put it down, and because you've spent a lot of time, you've admitted it yourself, to get to this point. So you got to trust in yourself now at this point, and give yourself enough time to kind of relax. And remember, don't be the first person in the door, be the last person. don't be late. Don't get me wrong, but don't be the first person there, because if you're the first person and there's a bunch of other people that are waiting behind you, they're going to be checking your book and being as strict as they can be. But if you're the last person, they're about to go on break. Couldn't care less.
Okay, good
Right?
tip. Good tip. Good tip. Hell yeah, I'm gonna
A
write that
lot less stress.
Do not be the first guy.
Also, if they give you plans, when you go in there, when you first sit down, your math is the first thing you'll go through, but don't start the math part of your test until you've spent some time going through those plans. In other words, if you wait till the time clock start and then dig those plans and you haven't looked at them yet, you're giving yourself kind of a disadvantage. But they have that little pretest in the beginning of the exam where they're asking you, like, how many square miles are there in the U.S. and things of that nature. Ignore that. Doesn't matter. As long as you put your social security number in there and hit the start button, that first little pretest, which does not count for you or against you, is like a 15-minute window. Use that time to look at those plans, get familiar with what all's on there. You won't necessarily know what questions are going to ask you, but that's the time to invest in kind of figuring out the layout of them. And then relax yourself, kind of get your mind ready. When you start the math, when you end it, it will automatically start the code section, and that code section will be so fast you'll run out of time if you're not careful. So on the math part, if you have to use the restroom or get up or stretch or anything, you have to do it while the clock is still running on your math. Okay.
Okay.
So just
Okay.
because if you don't, you just won't have any time after that second part starts.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, man. I don't know what else I could do for you except take the test for you.
Yeah, no, no, no. What I will do for you is as soon as you get out, like you mentioned on all your notes here, I will call you immediately and I'll give you any information on anything that I see on the test to help out the others. We'll pass it forward. No?
Yeah, for me, I think it's not as about knowing necessarily the exact parts, but just kind of generally what they're asking, just so that I can make sure I'm keeping people pointing the right parts of the code book. But
Yes, sir.
definitely, first and foremost,
Definitely.
this is about and your family and getting through this thing. And if you don't pass it, don't just shake it off, because it's going to be a challenge, right? And if you're not
Yes.
a test taker, it's easy to get kind of on edge. But just don't, whatever you do, make sure that you text me a copy of your exam,
Okay.
so I get a feel for where you're missing, so that we can kind of figure out a game plan on what else to study and put together for you. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Will do, sir. Will do. Thank you very much for all your help. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Best of luck to you, my brother.
Okay, thank you, my friend. You have a good day. Thanks for that guy, man. I know more than that guy. He was showing me what I know already. He's like, you put the money in? Can you call her?
Where is the end button for this day?
Amazing.
We're so hungry.
Thanks, you're good.